Jamie Moran, chat. This is a story, again, comes the way of content creator Ecstasies. You know who he is. You follow him on Twitter. Awesome. If you follow his work on YouTube, the guy is, in my opinion, connected. Yes, he has gotten some things wrong. Yes, he's even used a couple of clickbaitery topics in the last couple of months where I'm not a big fan of it, but I do like him as a content creator because he does have connections. And like I said, I don't know him personally where he's going to invite me over his house for a weekend to hang out and play games, but he has been on the show a couple of times and we do talk regularly. Well, he put out a post that's very interesting, like many of the topics today, and it surrounds Obsidian. Let me read the verbatim from what he wrote on Twitter. And of course, again, this has been added to the show notes. If you want to go and follow Ecstasies, I suggest you do so. If you want to read the post for yourself, you can, in fact, go and do that. He goes on to say Obsidian's CEO, Fergus Unkhart, stated that Obsidian has big plans, including more releases in the shared universe of Avowed and Pillars of Eternity, and more experimental projects like Pentiment. Now, this is where it starts to get exciting, at least for me. Marcus Morgan, the studio's vice president of operations, stated that he and the team want to dive even deeper into innovative reactivity for games like their cult classic Alpha Protocol, where the main characters could easily and freely be killed within the game. Now, look, I had to reread this twice. I just reread it a third time because I'm reading it live on the air. Look, I don't know how many people enjoy Alpha Protocol or even remember the game, but it was freaking dope. Now, so you might be saying, well, maybe, boom, they're referring to potentially releasing Alpha Protocol. Well, that's a little sticky. So I went and did some research for the show, and this is what I got. The IP, or the intellectual property of Alpha Protocol, is owned by Sega, but the game was delisted from stores due to expired music licensing and creating a complicated situation where developer Obsidian, now owned by Microsoft, technically held the rights to the IP, though Sega has control of its distribution and publishing, leading to its recent revival on GOG through a collaborative relicensing effort with Sega and Obsidian. So let's just start out with the fact that Sega is working with Obsidian. Sega is also working with Microsoft on their Super Games project. Microsoft and an employee that you might know her name, she's the president of Xbox. That's right, Sarah Bond, I'm being facetious, has taken multiple trips over to Sega, and they are working closely together on what could be big Xbox Game Pass deals. Whether that comes to fruition with some of their Super Game projects or a lot of the OG Sega games like Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, and games like Streets of Rage and Golden Axe could come to Game Pass, could be published by Sega and put onto Game Pass. We don't know. This is all speculation. But Jamie Moran, what's interesting is some of the conversation that we've always had is Obsidian seems to be the developer that no matter what is on their plate, they deliver. And this year is no exception. I mean, look, I'm sorry, folks. I don't know, Jamie and chat, if there is an award or a trophy for Developer of the Year. And I know that some people in this chat might immediately go and equate that with Sandfall Interactive because of how incredible Expedition 33 was and how it basically has run the gambit at the Game Awards, and it's probably going to run the gambit at some of the other big award shows like the BAFTAs, for instance. But I am sorry if Obsidian isn't recognized as one of the best devs of 2025, I'm going to say that it's a crime against the game's humanity. They released Avowed, and I don't care what you say, folks. If you don't like the game, good on you. I freaking loved it and will replay that game from scratch via New Game Plus, which is expected to release next year. Grounded 2, a lot of people loved what they did with it. They listened to the fan feedback, and apparently it's amazing. Not for me per se, but for a lot of people, they very much enjoyed it. And all I've done is praise the Outer Worlds 2, which we talked about yesterday, is getting a confirmed 2 expansions. And look, I know that there's no Outer Worlds 3 yet, but there is an Avowed 2, and there's a bunch of other stuff that they're working on. We do know that some people have returned to the studio in a big way. Jamie, I want to get your thoughts on this, because Alpha Protocol could be a game that comes back with the help of Sega and Obsidian. We do have obviously some context here that some people within the studio want to return to those different type of games. Alpha Protocol seems like that would be a game that they'd like to return, but we also know that they are working on, this has been confirmed, folks. I'm not making this up. They're working on several unannounced projects. Now, a lot of us, including myself, thought that Fallout New Vegas 2 was a lock, and it should be. But if it's not, and they want to bring back something like, I don't know, Alpha Protocol, yes, because what don't we have enough of? Jamie, you talk about Splinter Cell like you talk about Mass Effect. This would be dope. Let's get your thoughts, brother.
Yeah, I'll mention the license thing quickly. The reason why we don't have a lot of games backwards compatible is because of music licenses. Like, hell, I talk about it all the time. Batman Arkham Origins isn't available on the store to buy because, if I remember correctly, one song.
I believe that's you are correct in saying so.
And I'm playing through it right now, and it's incredible. Like, I replay it basically every Christmas. But like, and if I remember correctly, the Medal of Honor game from 2010, which is extremely underrated, that isn't backwards compatible because of one song in the credits. Like, crazy, right? So, like, unfortunately, unlike movies, video games just have these problems with music licenses. Like Alan Wake, a couple, like 2 years ago, got delisted, and then it got put back up because Remedy actually care about their games long term, and they actually sort all that stuff out, thankfully. But when it comes to Alpha Protocol was relisted on or listed on GOG about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was like, okay, so maybe something's happening with this game. I know there's people that want this backwards compatible. I unfortunately missed out on it back in the day because it came out when I was big into Call of Duty multiplayer. I would love to be able to play that. It's a third-person shooter, espionage RPG. We don't get games like that. I think that's a good thing about Obsidian. They can make just a wide variety of games. You mentioned Avowed. Like, we talked about Avowed a lot this year. I think Avowed was great, right? And it was very different to the Outer Worlds. And then you have Grounded, which is a survival game, which is very different. You have Pentiment, which is a different game. Like, Obsidian clearly know how to make a wide variety of games and RPGs. And I think going back to something like Alpha Protocol, I would love to see that in the future. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe that's me, a Mass Effect fan talking, but like a third person shooter RPGs, we just don't get many of them. Like, hell, one time Sega was meant to work with Obsidian on a third person shooter Aliens RPG, right? It got cancelled.
Right? Yeah.
And there's footage on YouTube people can watch, and I so wish that was a thing. But like, who knows what we'll see? And they're mentioning Alpha Protocol. I'm getting my hopes up. I know, but considering what Xbox and Obsidian's been like over the past few years, and you have the Xbox Developer Direct in January, maybe that's something we'll see. They have said that Obsidian they're working on multiple titles, and they'll surprise us again. Like, for some reason, people really like to hate on Avowed, and I can't really figure out why. Like it was a fun RPG set in the Pillars of Eternity universe. It already has some extended lore, so like there's a built-in fantasy like fan base there ready for a new game like that, And considering how big Baldur's Gate 3 was, maybe more people would be in for a Pillars of Eternity 3. You know, I think Obsidian of any of Microsoft's studios that make RPGs, they are going to be the ones that surprise us. They really are. They can make anything.
Yep.
And the fact that they came out with 3 games in 1 year, that's incredible. They can make really big games and really unique games with small teams at the same time. And then you have one of the founders or one of the creators of Fallout back at Obsidian now, and they are making a game that they can't talk about yet. And as a fan of RPGs, I could talk about role-playing games all day. I love that stuff. It's good to see that they have like one of the OGs back, and they're going to be making games for RPG fans, by RPG fans, and that's what Obsidian's all about. They'll experiment with something like a Pentiment or Grounded, which people like, but for me, it's all about RPGs, and it sounds like they're really going to be cooking something good. And if they lean into the whole espionage aspect again, because like, look, they can do sci-fi, they can do fantasy.
Yeah,
I would love to see them do a modern day espionage game. And like you said, I talk about Splinter Cell all day, maybe too much, but like, look, we don't get Splinter Cell games ever anymore. I'm convinced the Splinter Cell remake doesn't exist. Right? People from Ubisoft have actually told me that it does exist. No, I'm calling it lies. Until I have it in my hands, it doesn't exist. I'm suspicious of Ubisoft, and I can't prove it yet, but I'm sure that game doesn't exist. But if we can get Obsidian on a new espionage RPG, my god, that would sell. It would be so different, so unique for people. Like a lot of people are hyped for the Bond game, which unfortunately just got delayed till May, which isn't that bad. But like people want more games like that. And like, look, Alpha Protocol was very different to their other games. Very different. I think people would be up for something different. But yeah, that's my take. I think Alpha Protocol coming back, especially after its PC listing last year. Maybe they've been making a new version for Xbox consoles. We'll see, but it gives me some hope that something's actually happening.
So again, folks, we're going to take, before we get on out of here, I just want to add some additional context to this, because it's breadcrumbs, right? It's what we do as content creators. We find these stories. Sometimes we get information from other creators like Ecstasies, or you get people like Hazardor Gaming or Shinobi 602, or you get someone like Okami 13 underscore. These are all incredible content creators in their own rights, because they put out these stories that we would normally read from like a Game Rant or an IGN or something. And I don't really like to use the big trades anymore, because I don't trust them and I don't like a lot of them. I will give credit where credit is due when I do use the stories, and there are some that I do enjoy using regularly, like VGC, the Andy Robinson run Video Games Chronicles, one of my favorites, to be honest with you. Of course, Jez Corden of Windows Central and the team that they have over there, Samuel Tolbert and the likes. I love their journalists. I really do. But I do like to occasionally go out and find my own things, and that's what I did right here with this particular story, because I remember playing Alpha Protocol, and it's just, I don't know if it's interesting timing or what, but the story that Jamie broke, or we talked about briefly, about it coming back last year to GOG, was a collaborative effort by both Sega and Obsidian. Now, what's interesting about that is Obsidian is obviously owned by Microsoft. Sega has an unbelievable relationship with Microsoft, and more specifically Xbox. The other interesting thought and theory here is the report, and this is a confirmed report. I'm going to go look for it and add it to the show notes if you want to follow the breadcrumbs with me and Jamie when the show goes up on video on demand. But they have been confirmed to be working on several unannounced projects. And like I said in my spiel before, we, meaning me, have equated that to potentially being something Fallout related. And that could very well be true. It could be a new Fallout somewhere else. It could be Fallout New Vegas too, which I think would print money, right? It would be a game that prints freaking money because for a lot of people, including me, the host of this show, that is my favorite Fallout. But what if Jamie is onto something? What if our suggestions that a new alpha protocol is potentially in the works? So why I think that Jamie, you're onto something. You might have hit the nail on the head perfectly here. Is you said something about Obsidian, the talent at that studio, the leadership at that studio seems to be, in my personal opinion, because they're my favorite developer of Xbox Game Studios, the tip of spear. And you said something that's very interesting. They can make different types of games. Avowed is a fantasy game. Grounded 2 is a survival game. The Outer Worlds 2 is a space exploratory type of RPG. All different genres, all different games, but a pinch the same. And one of the things that is missing and has been missing for a decade plus is an espionage type of game. And this could see the return of what I believe I think it's a legendary IP that did not get enough shine, in my opinion. Jamie, before we get on out of here, any closing thoughts about what I just said?
I mean, look, I'm being optimistic. I do think that we could say something about Alpha Protocol because, like, getting the GOG listing like a year ago, they had to have worked out stuff with the music licenses, and we've seen in the past year, we have seen, Microsoft and Sega work together on games that are basically only on their platform, and that is Warhammer 40k Space Marine, the remaster, right? That was a random shadow drop, didn't leak, nobody knew about it, and then, oh yeah, by the way, Sega announced, oh, here's a remaster available now and also in Game Pass, right? No warning whatsoever, right? And this was like after Space Marine 2 was out for almost a year. Like people didn't expect a remaster, especially since like Sega was the publisher. So like considering it is Sega, I'm leaning into we maybe could see something. Because if we can get a Space Marine remaster, why can't we get an Alpha Protocol remaster? I think people would eat that up, especially considering we don't have games like that at the minute. But it is Obsidian, and I just like the fact that they can come out with multiple titles within like a short period of time. Because I think, this year, most games that Microsoft put out were announced this year. So if you look at next year, you have Fable, you have Forza Horizon 6, you have Gears of War ED, Halo Campaign Evolved. Like, that's 4 titles, 4 big titles. What's to say that they don't have maybe double that they're going to surprise us with, right? If you go back a year and a half ago, you might think I'm being crazy, but this year, it's been a great year. And like you're saying, like the mainstream gaming media and stuff, they're talking about how, like, it's been a bad year for Xbox and stuff. But if you're an Xbox fan that likes Xbox games, look at this year, right? How many different games have they put out? A lot of variety, which, I think we need more of in gaming. And, multiple RPGs, big focus on single player, and they still have put out multiplayer games. Like, just off this year alone, it's been great. In fact, I think it's been Microsoft's best first party year ever, right? You look at next year and you have Halo, Forza, Gears, Fable at the minimum. Yeah, I think they could surprise us, and I think Obsidian will be one of those studios.
Well, I like what you're putting down, brother. And I think that if there is one studio that can, it's definitely Obsidian. And again, it's not me trying to be facetious and compare one to the other. Obsidian is, in my opinion, as good and great as Bethesda, and Bethesda is as good and great as Obsidian. I think they both bring a significant amount of incredible IP, talent, and leadership to gaming. More specifically, Xbox gaming. And right now, the best place for RPGs from first party, right here at Xbox Game Studios, and I'm excited for